Her kind doesn't date humans, but mating season makes her. Exceptionally curious *, unlikely rumor test notification chimed on Noah Reyes' datapad. At exactly 0800 station time. Cultural exchange housing assignment. Commander Zarathan Velter, Kerali Dominion. Species. Compatibility rating, 73%. Dietary restrictions, none. Behavioral notes, maintain respectful distance. Do not initiate physical contact. Noah stared at the message, his coffee growing cold in the cramped quarters. That would soon become significantly more cramped. 3 months aboard Harmony Station as part of Earth's first interspecies cultural exchange program. And they were pairing him with a Kerali warrior. He'd studied their language, their customs, their rigid military hierarchy, but living with one was entirely different from reading about them. In xenocultural textbooks, the door chimed, and Noah straightened his rumpled shirt, running fingers through his dark hair. When the portal slid open, his breath caught. Commander Zarathan Velter stood nearly 7 feet tall, her imposing frame clad in the deep purple uniform of Kerali Command. Her skin held an ethereal blue-silver luminescence, and intricate bioluminescent patterns traced along her temples and throat marks of her noble caste. Her eyes, large and multifaceted like cut gemstones, regarded him with cool assessment. "You are the human linguistics specialist," she stated, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species, though edged with military precision. "I am Commander Zarathan. I will occupy the secondary quarters. Actually, they're both the same size," Noah offered, gesturing to the identical sleeping alcoves. "You can take whichever you prefer. I'm Noah, by the way, Noah Reyes." Her crystalline eyes narrowed slightly. "You would defer to me in choice of territory?" "It's not really territory," Noah said with a gentle smile. "It's just a place to sleep. We're sharing the space, not conquering it." Something flickered across her features, surprise, perhaps, or confusion. In Kerali culture, every interaction was a subtle power dynamic, every gesture measured for dominance or submission. This human's easy friendliness didn't fit their behavioral models. "Your species is peculiar," she said finally, moving to examine the quarters with military efficiency. "I have read extensive files on human behavior. Your emotional displays, your social chaos, your need for constant verbal affirmation. It is inefficient." Noah unpacked his few belongings, noting how she organized her possessions with geometric precision. "Maybe inefficient, but it keeps life interesting. Can I ask, is this your first time living with another species?" The Kerali do not typically engage in such intimate cohabitation with other races, Zarathan replied, her patterns flickering with what Noah would later learn indicated discomfort. "It is a diplomatic necessity, nothing more." Over the following days, they established routines. Noah would rise early, brewing the station's synthetic coffee and leaving a cup of Kerali meditation tea by her alcove. He'd discovered her preference through careful observation, how she lingered at the beverage dispensers, selecting aromatic herbs with deliberate care. She never acknowledged the gesture directly, but the tea disappeared each morning. Zarathan, meanwhile, maintained rigid schedules. Combat training at 0600, tactical briefings at 0900, cultural observation periods in the afternoons where she would sit in their common area, making notes on her datapad about human behavior patterns. Noah became her unwitting subject, though she never told him this directly. "Your laughter is frequent," she observed one evening as Noah watched a comedy program from Earth. "Is that bad? It serves no survival function, yet you engage in it repeatedly, even when alone." Noah paused the program, considering her words. "Maybe that's exactly why it's important. Not everything has to serve survival. Some things just make existence more bearable." Zarathan's bioluminescent patterns pulsed slowly, a sign Noah was beginning to recognize as deep thought. In her culture, joy was earned through victory, satisfaction through duty fulfilled. The concept of happiness as its own end was foreign, almost radical. "Your species is indeed peculiar, Noah Reyes," she said, and for the first time, her voice carried something that might have been curiosity instead of disapproval. Neither of them realized that Zarathan's biological cycle was approaching its most dangerous phase, or that her increasing fascination with human emotional patterns was about to become something far more complicated than mere academic interest. The awakening begins 3 weeks into their cohabitation. Noah noticed the changes before Zarathan did. Her typically precise movements became slightly more fluid, her bioluminescent patterns shifting through colors. He'd never seen deep purples bleeding into warm golds. Especially when he spoke directly to her, she began lingering in the common areas, her attention seeming to drift from her tactical reports to whatever Noah happened to be doing. "Commander," Noah asked one evening, finding her standing motionless by the observation window, staring at the star field. "Are you feeling all right?" Zarathan's patterns flared bright amber startlement. He'd learned. "I am processing new data," she said carefully. Human behavioral patterns are more complex than initial assessments indicated. What she didn't tell him was that her dreams had begun changing. Kerali typically experienced logical, ordered dream sequences focused on combat scenarios or tactical problems. Now her sleep brought vivid, confusing images, Noah's hands moving as he spoke, the sound of his voice calling her name, the way his eyes crinkled when he found something amusing. She would wake with her hearts racing, both the primary cardiac organ and the secondary circulatory pump that regulated her bioluminescence. The station's medical AI might have detected the hormonal shifts if Zarathan had reported for her routine checkup, but Kerali warriors were trained to suppress physical weaknesses. She convinced herself this was merely an academic fascination with an alien species, nothing more. "I have been wondering," she said during one of their shared evening meals, "about human pair bonding rituals." Noah nearly choked on his synthesized pasta. "That's kind of a broad topic. What specifically did you want to know?" "Your species forms attachments based on emotional compatibility rather than genetic optimization or territorial advantage. This seems," she paused, her patterns cycling through uncertain colors, "statistically improbable for evolutionary success." "Maybe," Noah said, setting down his fork, "but humans don't always make decisions based on what's statistically optimal. Sometimes we choose things because they feel right, even if we can't explain why." "Feel right," Zarathan repeated, as if testing the phrase. "This is intuitive decision-making?" "Something like that. Like how I felt comfortable around you from the first day. Even though everyone warned me that Kerali prefer formal distance, my instinct said you were someone I could trust." Zarathan's patterns went completely still, a Kerali response to profound shock. Her people were taught that other species, especially humans, were fundamentally untrustworthy, emotional, unpredictable, driven by chaotic impulses. Yet Noah's quiet sincerity, his consistent small kindnesses, his refusal to see her as either a threat or a conquest had slowly eroded assumptions. She'd held her entire adult life. "You trust easily," she said, her voice unusually quiet. "Not really, but I trust you." That night, Zarathan lay in her sleeping alcove, staring at the ceiling as her bioluminescent patterns pulsed in slow, hypnotic waves. The awakening was beginning. She could no longer deny it. Every few cycles, Kerali experienced this biological imperative, a heightening of all senses and emotions designed to facilitate mate selection. Her people managed it through meditation, isolation, and carefully arranged encounters with genetically suitable partners. But here, on this station, surrounded by alien scents and sounds, her awakening consciousness was fixating on entirely inappropriate stimuli. Noah's laugh had become a sound she craved. His habit of humming while he worked sent pleasant vibrations through her enhanced auditory processing. Even his scent, that distinctly human mixture of warmth and organic complexity, was beginning to affect her in ways that defied every cultural prohibition she'd ever learned. She pressed her palms against her temples, trying to center herself through traditional meditative techniques, but instead of achieving calm, she found her enhanced senses reaching toward the next alcove, detecting the steady rhythm of Noah's breathing, the subtle sounds of his movement. "This is problematic," she whispered to herself in her native tongue, a phrase that would prove to be the understatement of her lifetime. In the morning, Noah found her standing in their kitchenette, staring at the tea he'd prepared for her with an expression of profound confusion. "Zarathan, is something wrong with the tea?" She looked up at him, and Noah was startled to see that her patterns were cycling rapidly through colors. He'd never witnessed deep crimsons and bright golds swirling together in complex spirals. "No," she said finally, "the T is perfect. That is precisely the problem." Biological chaos. Diplomatic incident began with what Noah thought was a simple misunderstanding. During an interspecies cultural presentation, Ambassador Kexton of the hegemony made a dismissive comment about human emotional instability, calling them barely evolved primates driven by primitive impulses. Noah had dealt with such attitudes before. A shrug, maybe a polite correction, then moving on. But Zarathin rose from her seat like a force of nature. "You will retract that statement," she said, her voice carrying the full authority of Kerali military command. Her bioluminescent patterns blazed with warning colors that made several diplomats step backward. "Commander Zarathin," Ambassador Kexton replied smoothly, "surely you, as a warrior of distinction, recognize the scientific accuracy of I recognize ignorance when I hear it." Zarathin interrupted, a breach of diplomatic protocol that sent murmurs through the assembled crowd. "Humans demonstrate complex emotional intelligence, adaptive problem solving, and behavioral flexibility that your species mistakes for weakness, because you lack the capacity to comprehend it." Noah watched in amazement as this proud alien warrior who had spent weeks cataloging human inefficiencies publicly defended his entire species with fierce conviction. The formal presentation dissolved into uncomfortable silence as Zarathin returned to her seat, her patterns still pulsing with protective aggression. Later, in their quarters, Noah couldn't contain his curiosity. "Thank you for standing up for us back there, but I thought you agreed that humans were chaotic and inefficient." Zarathin turned away from him, her shoulders rigid. "My previous assessments were incomplete." Incomplete how? She was quiet for so long that Noah thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I have been experiencing complications." "What kind of complications? Are you sick? Should I call the medical bay?" "No." The word came out sharper than intended, and Noah saw her patterns flare with what he was beginning to recognize as distress. "It is not illness. It is biological. My species undergoes certain phases." Noah waited patiently, sensing this was difficult for her to explain. "We call it the awakening. Every few cycles, our bodies and minds become enhanced, more sensitive. It is meant for." She paused, struggling with the words mate, selection, and bonding. Understanding dawned on Noah's face, followed immediately by concern. "And you're going through this now here. That must be incredibly difficult. Being away from your own people." Zarathin laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Difficult, yes, but not for the reasons you think." She turned to face him fully, her patterns cycling through deep purples and golds. "The awakening heightens all senses, all emotional responses. It should make me seek out appropriate Kerali partners instead. Instead, my enhanced consciousness fixates on inappropriate stimuli. Your voice, your laughter, the way you show kindness without expecting anything in return. The awakening should repel me from alien influences, but it seems to be having the opposite effect." Noah felt his heart skip a beat. "Zarathin, do you understand what I am telling you?" she continued, her voice growing more intense. "My biology is compelling me toward behaviors that are culturally forbidden, genetically discouraged, and socially scandalous. I am a commander of the Kerali Dominion, and I find myself affected by a human." The weight of her words hung between them. Noah had noticed her increased attention, the way she seemed to study his every movement, but he'd attributed it to scientific curiosity. Now, understanding the true nature of her biological state, everything clicked into place. "What does this mean?" he asked quietly. "It means," Zarathin said, her patterns dim with something that looked like defeat, "that I am compromised. Station protocol requires that any personnel experiencing biological compulsions be isolated until the phase passes. I should report to medical, request quarantine, and maintain distance from all potential triggers. But you haven't done that." "No," she admitted, "I have not. Because the thought of isolation, of not seeing you, of not hearing your voice or watching your ridiculous human habits, It causes me more distress than the awakening itself. Noah stepped closer, and Zarathan's patterns immediately brightened in response to his proximity. What if you didn't have to choose between duty and whatever this is? There is no alternative. Kerali do not form bonds with other species. It is not done. Maybe it's not done. Noah said softly, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. Zarathan's patterns went completely still, and Noah realized he was suggesting something that could change both their lives forever. Under artificial starst observation deck at night was Zarathan's refuge. When the awakening made her thoughts to chaotic, when Noah's presence became simultaneously necessary and unbearable, she would come here to watch the stars and attempt to meditate her way back to equilibrium. Tonight, she wasn't alone. I thought I might find you here, Noah said, settling onto the bench beside her with careful distance between them. He'd learned to read her patterns well enough to know when she was struggling. The stars are the same from anywhere in the galaxy, Zarathan said without looking at him. Distance doesn't change their nature, but it changes how we see them, Noah replied. Perspective matters. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the distant suns through the station's massive viewport. Finally, Zarathan spoke. I have been thinking about what you said, about alternatives, and there are no alternatives, Noah. My people have spent millennia perfecting our social structure, our genetic selection processes, our cultural stability. Interspecies bonding threatens all of that. Or maybe, Noah said carefully, it offers something new. Zarathan's patterns flickered with agitation. You do not understand the consequences. If the Dominion learned that one of their commanders had formed an emotional attachment to an alien, I would face exile, disgrace, the loss of everything I have worked to achieve. And if you suppress this, ignore what you're feeling, what happens then? I complete my tour of duty, return to my home world, accept an appropriate mate selected by the council, live a life of honor and purpose. Would it make you happy? The question hit Zarathan like a physical blow. Happiness, that peculiar human concept that she'd been studying and dismissing for weeks. Happiness is not the goal. Duty is the goal. Service is the goal. The continuation of our species and culture is the goal. But would it make you happy? Noah pressed gently. Zarathan was quiet for a long moment, her patterns cycling through deep blues and muted grays. I do not know, she finally admitted. Before I met you, I never questioned whether duty and happiness could be the same thing. Now, she turned to face him fully, and Noah was struck by the vulnerability in her crystalline eyes. Now, I understand why your species makes choices based on feeling rather than logic. Because logic tells me to report to medical, request isolation, and forget these inappropriate impulses. But my feelings, these strange, chaotic human-like feelings, tell me that losing you would be worse than any consequence I might face. Noah felt his breath catch. Zarathan, your kind is beneath ours, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That is what we are taught from birth. Humans are emotional, chaotic, weak, but I no longer understand why my thoughts reach for you in quiet moments. You are logical. Your kindness serves no strategic purpose. Your laughter accomplishes nothing. And yet, my instincts are not repelled. The awakening should compel me toward strength, toward genetic compatibility, toward partners who will elevate my status and produce superior offspring. Instead, it compels me toward you, toward your gentleness, toward the way you see beauty in inefficient things, toward possibilities I was never taught to want. Noah reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he gently touched her hand. Her patterns immediately flared bright gold at the contact. What if we tried? He said softly. What if we took this one step at a time and figured it out together? The risks are yours to choose, Noah interrupted. I won't push you into anything that could destroy your life, but I won't pretend I don't feel something too. These weeks with you, watching you discover things about humans that surprise you, seeing you defend us when you thought no one would appreciate it. Zarathan, you're not what I expected either. What did you expect? A cold, distant warrior who would tolerate my presence and count the days until reassignment. Instead, I found someone who brings me tea when I'm stressed, who listens to my terrible jokes, Who cares enough about fairness to risk diplomatic incidents? Zarathan's patterns pulsed with something Noah had never seen before, hope mixed with terror. If we pursue this path, there may be no going back. Then we'd better make sure it's worth the journey. She looked down at their joined hands, her bioluminescent patterns casting shifting colors across their skin. The station protocols can be navigated. We're not violating any actual laws, just some guidelines about emotional entanglements during biological phases. And my people will have to decide whether their traditions are more important than your happiness. Zarathan lifted their joined hands, studying the contrast between her luminescent skin and his darker human tones. This is madness. The best things usually are. New Worlds. 6 months later, Noah woke to the soft shimming of the communication array and the familiar sight of Zarathan's patterns pulsing gently in the pre-dawn darkness. She was already awake, as always, but no longer rigid with meditation. Instead, she was watching him with the peaceful expression he'd come to treasure. "Good morning," he murmured, reaching for her hand. "Good morning, my cherished chaos," she replied, a phrase that had become their private endearment. Her patterns brightened at his touch, no longer a source of shame, but of celebration. The communication array chimed again, and Noah groaned. "Official business this early?" The council's response, Zarathan said, her patterns shifting to more neutral colors. It arrived during the night cycle, 3 months earlier. Zarathan had done something unprecedented in Kerali history. She had formally requested permission to establish an interspecies bond, submitting detailed reports on human Kerali compatibility, emotional stability assessments, and a comprehensive proposal for cultural exchange benefits. The request had sent shockwaves through the Dominion hierarchy. Noah sat up, studying her calm expression. "You don't seem worried." "I am not," she said simply. "Whatever their decision, I have already made mine." They reviewed the message together. The council's response was lengthy, formal, and surprisingly thoughtful. After extensive debate, they had reached an unprecedented decision. Zarathan would be permitted to continue her interspecies relationship as part of an extended cultural study, provided she document her experiences for future policy consideration. She would retain her rank and honors, but would be assigned to long-term diplomatic service rather than combat operations. A compromise, Noah said. "They're making you a guinea pig for interspecies relations. They are acknowledging that change is possible," Zarathan corrected, "and they are allowing me to choose my own path. It is more than I dared hope for." Noah smiled, pulling her closer. "So, Ambassador Zarathan, what's our first official diplomatic mission?" "Actually," she said, her patterns taking on the mischievous gold that had become his favorite color, "there is something else in the message. The Kerali Council has received similar requests from 17 other interspecies couples across the galaxy. It seems we have started something of a revolution of love, a revolution of choice," Zarathan corrected. "Love is the human word. We prefer optimal bonding despite statistical improbability." Noah laughed, the sound that had first caught her attention and continued to make her patterns dance. "That's the most romantic thing you've never said." "I am still learning your language of the heart," she admitted, "but I have an excellent teacher." Later that morning, as they shared breakfast and planned their new assignment, establishing the galaxy's first interspecies relationship protocol, Noah reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed. What had begun as a housing assignment had become something unprecedented, a bridge between worlds, a challenge to ancient assumptions, and proof that connection could transcend biology, culture, and expectation. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, as Zarathan reviewed diplomatic communications, her patterns flickering through the colors that indicated deep concentration. "Regret what?" "Choosing chaos over order, choosing feeling over logic." Zarathan looked up from her datapad, her multifaceted eyes bright with amusement. "Noah, my love, I did not choose chaos over order. I chose a different kind of order, one based on what we build together rather than what we inherited separately." "And the feeling over logic part? Who said I chose feeling over logic?" she asked, her patterns shifting to the playful combinations he'd learned indicated she was about to make a point. My feelings for you are entirely logical. You make me stronger, wiser, more capable of seeing beyond my limitations. You challenge me to grow while accepting who I am. You bring out qualities in me that make me a better leader, a better diplomat, a better version of myself." She stood, moving to the observation window where they'd first acknowledged their impossible attraction. "Choosing you was not emotional chaos, Noah. It was the most logical decision I have ever made." Noah joined her at the window, wrapping his arms around her tall frame as they watched ships from dozens of species dock at the station. Somewhere among them were other couples like them, beings from different worlds who had found something worth crossing the galaxy to protect. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now," Zarathan said, her patterns bright with anticipation, "we teach the galaxy that the best adventures begin when you stop asking why would this work and start asking what if it could." And as the artificial stars wheeled overhead and the endless possibilities of space stretched before them, Noah realized that sometimes the most profound discoveries came not from exploring distant worlds, but from opening your heart to the alien soul sleeping in the next room. Their love story would become the first entry in the interspecies relationship database, required reading for diplomats, and proof that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had dared to imagine. But for Noah and Zarathan, it was simply home, a place they had built together, one impossible day at a time, in defiance of every rule except the one that mattered most. When you find something real, you fight for it, no matter how many light years stand in your way.